Your Vote Counts. It's Mr. Echols and Dunnington. Having you guys back is great. And I'll tell you what else is interesting. Filing is coming up in the middle of the legislative session, and there could be some surprises.
There will absolutely be some surprises, and the building will be full next week. From Wednesday to Friday next week is filing for every statewide office in the state of Oklahoma for 101 House seats and for half of the state Senate seats. There are already a number of members that have indicated that they are not going to file for re-election, which means there's going to be even more open seats than usual this year. There are a number of members that are terming out. Those seats will also be open. I think it's going to be kind of like a Zoom mentality up at the Capitol next week with everybody filing for office. But this is democracy. This is what really matters. If you want your voice to count, if you want your vote to count, run for an office, but make sure you file next week.
Okay, and then the ads will start. Oh, they already have started. But it's going to be an interesting time, and especially in Republican politics.
You know, it's really going to be interesting. Last Thursday, I had a great time talking to a group of students from the Western Heights area, talking about the importance of voting, of getting engaged, and we're going to see that next week. It's filing for all statewide elected officials. I mean, we're going to set up what appears to be a Joy Hoffmeister, Connie Johnson race in the Democrat primary, a Kevin Stead against what I'll call a player to be named later, see if somebody new comes in that primary. But really what will be very exciting next week at the Capitol is people will come in, will make their voices heard, and there's a reason we call it Your Vote Counts. I mean, it's time to figure out who's going to be on the ballot, and let's go vote for our representation.
Okay, and one of the things you're going to hear on the Republican side of the aisle is we hate Washington. We know that. Part of it's inflation. Speaker in his podcast, which you catch on Mitchell Talks News 9 News on 6 during the week, in the evenings, he said we've got to do something about the I word you've been talking about for months, inflation. Government pumps all this money, $10 trillion since the start of the pandemic. What could the legislature do?
Well, we need to do some things. Part of the reason citizens are so frustrated with President Biden is what's going on with inflation. I would argue this is the highest tax year in the history of the country since really the end of the Great Depression. It's because of inflation, that hidden tax that is inside there. Your legislature is committed this year on the Republican House side. We don't know, it'll either be a refund, an income tax cut, cutting rid of sales tax on groceries, but we are committed to putting more money in our citizens' pockets. You can't continue to print the money they're printing in D.C. Every time they print it, they're taking it away from you because everything is more expensive, and we are going to fight inflation through tax cuts this year.
You're a businessman now. You understand how this works, and you watch what the legislature's talking about. Big picture, this is going to be a big campaign issue, isn't it?
I think it will be a big campaign issue, but let's go back to that idea that we have filing that's next week, and then let's think about all of these elections that are going to take place. You're going to see a lot of statewide members and a lot of folks running for the legislature running against people in D.C. Don't let that fool you, because the state legislature takes care of state business. So if you start getting a bunch of mailers talking about how they're going to defeat President Biden and the liberal Democrats in D.C., and they're getting elected to a House seat or a Senate seat, then they're not telling you the full truth. But I will say inflation is a big issue, and we need to pay attention to it. I'd like to point out that we have the lowest unemployment in the state of Oklahoma, and we have some of the highest wages right now. And I think both of those things are really good. We need to build on things and not be afraid of everything.
He's Jason Dunnington, and he stands by that message. All right, we come back, we're going to hear about another loft report, and it's more crying. They don't know how to count when we come back. Every time that the Legislative Office of Fiscal Transparency does a report, the people that are subject to the report go, wah, they don't know how to count. From my perspective all these years, when an agency is being microscopically examined and they're upset, that usually means that whoever's investigating them is effective. Am I right?
Well, I think the Legislative Office of Fiscal Transparency, and that's what it is for the viewers, we've talked about it a lot. This is a new arm of the legislature that digs into what's going on inside our agencies and are real hawks for how your taxpayer dollars are being spent. They looked at some things going on in tourism this last week. You know, I don't know one way or another. It deals with some contracts that were given away in state parks. What I think you're being seen, though, is that Loft is working. Loft is working the way it's intended to work, and we are really being hawks with your taxpayer dollars. Just because Loft looks at an agency doesn't mean they did anything wrong, but those are taxpayer dollars. They're not government dollars, and Loft is doing a great job.
I'm looking forward to the first agency that gets examined and goes, you know, everything they said is true. It's just not happening. So it's an interesting report. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think transparency is paramount when it comes to democracy, and especially here in the state of Oklahoma, we need to make sure that we're spending our dollars correctly. One of the good things about Loft is it's made up of members of both parties, and both parties have the opportunity to ask questions of the Loft report that comes out and of those that are being questioned. And that happened this last week with the Department of Tourism. There are a number of really great questions asked by Republicans and Democrats of the Department of Tourism when it comes to private-public partnerships. And I think it's important for us to get down to the details and find out really what's going on.
Okay, a few minutes ago we talked about the primaries, and we know how politics is done these days. It's ugly. But there are aspects, and there are still organizations that are still trying to make things civil and moving forward in an effective way, getting things done for folks. The Rodale Fellowship, you guys are both members. You're going to go to a meeting this week. Tell us how that Rodale works and why it's a good hope for the future.
Yeah, being a Rodale Fellow is probably one of the greatest honors that I've had to get. When I was elected, it was an opportunity that was provided me through former Congressman Mickey Edwards, who's run this program for a number of years, has stepped out here recently. In order to become a Rodale Fellow, you have to be nominated by a Rodale Fellow to get in the program. It's 12 Dems, 12 Republicans each year. I had the great honor of being nominated by former Speaker Hickman, who gave me the opportunity to go and be a Rodale Fellow. We dialogue about policy, we dialogue about democracy, we dialogue about philosophy. At the end of the day, it's Republicans and Democrats trying to find a way forward for our country. It's an incredible program. Happy to be a part of it.
Your thoughts?
Well, I'm excited to be part of it too. I've been a part of it for 5 years now, and it's about civility in politics. And what I love about it is I'm a very conservative member, and it doesn't ask me not to be conservative. We have very, very liberal members, and we don't ask them not to be liberal. What we ask each other is to see our own common humanity. You know, when you go on social media, when you look at the keyboard warriors out there, there are sides wanting to tell you the Democrats are evil or the Republicans are evil. What I hope you hear on this is, I don't think that's true. Now, I think my side's right, and I think conservative policy is what's best for the state of Oklahoma. But those that disagree with me, they're not evil, they're my friends. And they want what's best for the state of Oklahoma too. And I love things like Rodale that help us all move forward together.
Congratulations to both of you. See this again at news9.com/yourvotecounts and follow me on Twitter @MitchellTalks.